They called him Seer Ilan Varn, the longest-serving psychometric evaluator of the Chilari ascendancy. For over 300 cycles, he had touched the thoughts of countless species from crystalline empaths on Parnaxus to the light-born swarms of the Helian Rift. Each time, he had returned with order, with understanding, with clarity. But as his vessel, the Lucid Whisper, drifted through the black towards Sol's third satellite, Ilan felt something he had not felt in centuries: hesitation. Ahead lay the humans, a species barely 5 decades into faster-than-light travel, yet already they had spread like wildfire across their system. Rapid development was not unheard of, but this speed had unsettled many on the council. So they had summoned Ilan, the Mindreader of stars, to assess the psychological profile of Earth's dominant life form. His aide, Medic, announced their arrival with practiced calm. The colony on Luna has confirmed readiness. Their emissary awaits. Ilan Varn folded the edges of his ceremonial cloak and peered through the viewport. The gray-white orb shimmered with synthetic cities. The lead diplomat? He asked. Name: Alina Kerr. Age: 42 cycles, Earthborn. Previous experience in 3 interspecies contact missions. Behavioral files suggest calm temperament. Logical patterns, high cognitive symmetry, stable minds, Ilan mused, are the easiest to entangle. Medic hesitated. There is one anomaly, Seer. The humans agreed to our telepathic method without concern. That stopped Ilan. No protests? No hesitation? None. They seemed unconcerned. Curious, Ilan said, crest faintly glowing violet. Either they do not understand the depth of our scan, or they believe themselves invulnerable. The vessel's docking clamps clicked. The airlock hissed. The seer gathered his thoughts and readied himself. Evaluation was routine. Thought patterns could always be categorized. Biological chaos, no matter how dense, always had rhythm. So he believed, until the door opened, and the human mind stood before him. Alina Kerr, composed, steady, her uniform crisp. She offered their traditional greeting, a hand to the chest, a palm outstretched. Words followed, shaped with precision. Ilan, welcome. I'm Alina. This is my colleague Jordan Rell. Ilan returned the gesture. Your greeting is noted. They proceeded through the station's corridors, Medic trailing behind. The seer extended his senses, brushing lightly against Alina's mind. Just a glimpse, just protocol, and then a fracture. Not a fracture in her, but in everything he expected to find. There were layers, not 2, not 3, but dozens. Emotions, memories, simulations, beliefs, past regrets, imagined futures all at once. She was thinking about a child's homework, reciting protocol, remembering a warm sunset, planning conversation strategies, inventing scenarios that had not occurred, and simultaneously processing the tension in his voice. He stumbled. Is everything all right? Alina asked. Ilan recovered. Artificial gravity adjustments, he lied. The truth was too much too soon. He tried Jordan Rell next. An engineer? Perhaps simpler. But Rell's mind was worse, a chaos of schematics, equations, fictional games, and devotion to a thing called pizza with a reverence that bordered on spiritual. Ilan pulled back. Medic's crest flashed concern. Seer, shall we rest before proceeding? No, Ilan said too quickly. We continue. They entered the conference chamber, and the minds that awaited him would push the seer beyond the brink of reason. As they entered the chamber, more humans awaited. Their presence filled the room with a quiet hum of polite anticipation, but to Ilan Varn, it was like stepping into a storm. Not of sound but of thought. Every human mind in that space was alive with complexity. They were thinking in clusters, parallel streams, tangents birthed from tangents. One thought would spiral into 5, and each of those 5 branched again. Loops, fractals, cascades of cognition without boundaries. They smiled, they gestured, they spoke, but beneath their practiced diplomacy, their minds churned like nebulae exploding in silence. Alina began a presentation, speaking of Earth's encounters with other species. She described their commitment to cooperation and learning, how they had made contact, not with fear, but with hope. Ilan barely heard her. He was focused on the tidal waves of cognition behind her words. There was no discipline, no order, no containment. The humans thought in contradictions, in simulations, in metaphor, in abstract loops that defied the fundamental laws of thought itself. They were not masking chaos. They were chaos living it, managing it, embracing it. Seer, Alina's voice pierced through the psychic roar. Would you care for water? Ilan blinked, realizing that Medic had stepped closer, crest a deep shade of concern. His own crest had begun to shimmer, gray, the color of disorientation. Still, he nodded. Yes, thank you. The formal dinner followed, carefully planned, structured for diplomacy. Humans and Chilari dined together, sharing meals adapted for divergent biology. Music played, something humans called classical, an offering, they had said, a gift of culture. Ilan sat beside Alina. She spoke kindly. She asked questions about his species, about his ship, about the subtle engineering of gravity fields, but he saw through it. She was also planning the next day's schedule, remembering a beach trip, analyzing his body language, comparing it to two alien novels she had read, and unbelievably imagining what her deceased grandmother would say about this meeting. Ilan leaned in. His voice was quieter now, but edged with urgency. How do you hold it? He asked. The layers, the multiplicity, the cacophony? Jordan chuckled from down the table. What? You mean multitasking? Ilan's fingers twitched. No, not mere tasks. I mean thoughts that exist in direct conflict. Planning while fearing, dreaming while doubting, imagining outcomes while knowing they are false. How do you function with so much contradiction? Medic moved beside him. Seer, perhaps no. Ilan raised his hand. This must be understood. And without waiting, he reached again, not a brush this time, but a deep dive. He plunged into Alina's mind, and what he saw shattered the illusion of species equivalence forever. There were thought streams, yes, but beneath those were worlds imagined, felt, built. She was running simulations, reliving memories, overlaying emotional truths over objective logic. She held imaginary constructs of success and failure at once. She remembered things that had not happened, yet felt them as if they had. And deeper still, she contained contradictions, beliefs held in full awareness of their falseness. Doubt and hope, certainty and fantasy, all existing together. Ilan recoiled. He gasped. He gripped the table with trembling hands. How do you not go mad? He whispered. Alina reached to steady him. Seer? He did not answer. He was no longer sure if he could. The room had fallen silent, held in the tension of an unspoken revelation. Ilan Varn sat still, hands rigid, eyes wide, not in aggression, but in the paralysis of awe and disbelief. His crest, once a smooth blue of confidence, now pulsed with streaks of gray and pale white. His breathing slowed, each inhale a struggle. Jordan leaned over to Alina. Should we call for medical? No, Ilan said suddenly, voice hoarse. No, I must know. Medic's crest shimmered with frantic concern, but he did not intervene. He knew the seer's pride. He knew the ancient oath. No mind unread, no mystery and challenge. So the next morning, Ilan insisted on continuing the assessment. The others tried to stop him. Medic pleaded. The human medics, confused but compassionate, recommended rest. Still, Ilan pressed on. I must see a simpler mind, he said. A base layer of their cognition. A foundation. They chose a man named Diran Holt, a maintenance worker, humble, quiet, with rough hands and soft eyes. He sat across from Ilan in a small, calm room. Walls painted a tranquil blue. No distractions. No crowds. I fix air filters, Diran had said. I watch old movies. Nothing complicated. Ilan nodded, hiding the tremor in his fingers. Good, very good. And then he entered. He touched Diran's mind, and at once, he knew he had made a mistake. The simplicity he expected was not absence, it was density. Diran thought about repairs, yes, also about hypothetical failures, movie scenes, fictional parallels, engineering flaws, what-ifs about alien tech, and a stray memory of his mother's baking. He imagined new safety systems. He wondered about disaster drills. He invented schematics, all in real time. He wasn't just thinking. He was building. Ilan pushed further, and then it happened. He saw Diran's imagination, not memory, not dream. Imagination. The construction of what did not exist, layered, precise, tactile. Machines that had never been built, visualized in full. Solutions that had not been needed, already formed. Contraptions created from instinct, tested in his mind before ever becoming matter. You're creating, Ilan whispered, seeing what isn't, changing it, modifying it. Diran opened, his eyes puzzled. The anti-grav skateboard? Oh, was I not supposed to think about that? You're not an engineer. You're not trained, Ilan stammered. But, you see it, you know it. Diran shrugged. I just think. Ilan began to tremble. You think, he echoed, voice hollow. That's how everyone thinks. And then Ilan Varn screamed. It was not a scream of pain, but of collapse, the howl of a structure caving inward under the pressure of something it was never built to contain. His crest turned white, not the pale white of confusion, the pure white of revelation, a color never recorded in Chalari history. The room descended into chaos. Ilan Varn sat frozen, the brilliance of his crest pulsing in a natural white. His limbs stiffened, not with resistance, but with awe. Medic rushed to his side, shouting for help in tones that wavered between panic and reverence. Diran stood against the wall, wide-eyed, uncertain. I didn't mean to hurt him, he said. I was just thinking. Medical personnel arrived, led by a human woman named Mara, calm, competent, trained in Chalari physiology. She examined the seer with quiet urgency, her scanner flashing with incomprehensible patterns. This shouldn't be possible, she whispered. His neural patterns are reorganizing, trying to adapt. Medic, still holding Ilan's shoulder, muttered, he's rewriting himself. Because of what he saw. What did he see? Mara asked. Medic looked toward Diran, then back to Ilan. He saw the unseeable, a mind folding in on itself, forming new realities. He saw the infinite, in the thoughts of a maintenance worker. Ilan's lips moved, barely forming words. They dream of dreams, and those dreams birth more. Mara leaned closer. Seer? His eyes focused briefly. He imagined a machine that didn't exist, then changed it, then tested it, all inside his mind. He swallowed hard. How can something be real and not real, yet still usable? Alina arrived, breath caught in her throat as she took in the scene. She looked to Medic. Will he recover? Medic's crest was a storm of sorrow. I don't know. Our kind has never encountered this. Ilan spoke again, voice clearer now but strangely detached. They believe things they know are false. They imagine what they admit is impossible, and then they act on them. Mara checked the scanner again. His brain is attempting to mirror human cognition. It's burning through new pathways, but that kind of shift, it isn't meant to happen. Ilan turned toward her slowly. You think in spirals, in layers, in mirrors. He blinked, and each eye focused in a different direction. You imagine futures that cannot be, and behave as though they already are. Your thoughts are recursive. Your minds fold in on themselves and bloom. His crest pulsed white again, now rippling with shades no one could name. Alina reached for Medic's arm. What does that color mean? Medic didn't answer right away. He stared at his mentor, his teacher, the most disciplined mind of his species now unraveling under the weight of human thought. We don't have a word for it, he said softly. We've never seen it before. 3 days passed. Ilan Varn lay still, surrounded by the low hum of medical devices not meant for minds like his. The crest upon his head no longer shifted in expected rhythms. It glowed a swirling white, layered with iridescence, as though every emotion his people had ever catalogued now pulsed in unison. Outside the observation pane, Chalari officials debated, their crests flashing with colors of urgency. Medic remained by the seer's side, unwilling to leave the one mind that had once been untouchable, now shattered, now beautiful. Mara adjusted the readings. He's stable, she said to Alina, who stood silent by the door. But some things changed. His brain has reorganized. Entire pathways that didn't exist before are now alive. Medic stepped forward. He was forced to adapt. Human thought isn't just layered, it's fractal. Each idea blossoms into 10 others. Each feeling is laced with memory, imagination, contradiction. Alina folded her arms, eyes narrowing. And this makes us dangerous? Medic's crest rippled with mixed color. It makes you incomprehensible. Through the glass, one of the Chalari scientists gestured emphatically, speaking to others who nodded solemnly. What are they saying? Alina asked. They want to classify humanity, Medic said quietly, as a class 1 psychological hazard, for how we think. He turned to her, eyes tired. For what your thoughts do. In the silence that followed, Ilan stirred. He blinked, spoke. The shapes of their thoughts. Mara rushed to his side. They spiral, he whispered. They spiral without end. His eyes met Alina's. All of you. he said, are like this? She nodded slowly. It's normal to us. He laughed, then a sound the Chilari had never heard from him. Soft, reverent, afraid. I have touched minds that bent space. That spoke to stars. That restructured atoms with belief. He struggled to sit. Medic helped him. But never, never. A mind that believed what it knew was false and still drew strength from that belief. Mara placed a steadying hand on his arm. You shouldn't strain. I must speak to the council. Medic hesitated. Seer, your state they must know, Ilan said, his voice rising. Humans are not a species. They are a horizon, a threshold, the border of understanding. His crest pulsed brighter, the light reflecting in Medic's stunned eyes. They must be studied, Ilan whispered, not because they are dangerous in arms or tools, but because of what they might think of next. Ilan's message reached the council before the medics could restrain him. In his lucid hours, he dictated thoughts that carried the weight of galactic consequences. Medic transmitted them without alteration because how could they be altered? Each word burned with urgency. They dream while awake, the seer had said. They simulate futures while entangled in their past. They hold paradox as if it were breath. The council's response was immediate. Delegates argued across entire systems. Proposals arose. Quarantine Earth, sever contact, observe from distance. Others urged understanding, curiosity, fear. Alina, read the official inquiry in her private terminal. Submit full details of human thought, construction, decision-making, anomalies, and imaginative capacities. Detail risk, detail control. She sat back, unsure whether to laugh or grieve. Jordan and Diran arrived later, summoned for follow-up interviews. Both men shifted awkwardly under the scrutiny. Diran scratched his neck. Did I do something wrong? No, Alina replied. You thought. Medic observed silently. His crest was still solemn. He had stopped arguing with the others. Instead, he stayed close listening. They're afraid, he admitted. Of us? Jordan asked. Of what your minds imply. That thought isn't linear. That emotion can coexist with contradiction. That imagination reshapes the real. Diran tilted his head. But imagination's just what we do when we're bored, right? Medic almost smiled. You dream with such conviction. You forget it's not real. He stood and approached Ilan's bed. The seer's crest still shimmered, not fading, not stabilizing, just evolving. Ilan whispered. The maintenance worker saw infinite paths in a broken filter. Medic closed his eyes. You always said knowledge could contain anything. No, Ilan replied, his voice faint. Knowledge frames, but humanity floods. Alina took a deep breath. You said they must join the council. Why? Ilan opened his eyes fully, the clarity returning. Because if we keep them out, we will never understand what is already becoming real inside their minds. They are not dangerous for what they've done. He paused, but for the futures they haven't yet imagined. Medic looked at Alina. They're afraid that you might dream something into existence that we can't undo. The council convened under starlight chambers older than memory. Each representative species submitted their analysis. Data streams flowed like rivers of logic, each bound in charts and rational fear. Yet all paled before the words of Ilan Varn, written not in calculation, but in awe. The danger is not what they have. It is what they might think into being. In the chambers of the medical bay, Ilan remained under observation. But his presence, his essence, had changed. His crest no longer shimmered in any known sequence. Instead, it pulsed in ways untranslatable. Like emotion wrapped in mathematics no one had yet conceived. Medic stayed beside him, answering questions, relaying council queries. Do you still believe they should be admitted? A voice from the hala relay asked. Ilan's gaze never moved from the ceiling. Yes, but you are broken. I am altered, he whispered. Not shattered, reshaped. Alina entered the room, carrying the translated copy of the council's debate. She placed it gently on the console, but Ilan did not look at it. They are afraid of us, she said quietly. No, he answered, blinking slowly. They are afraid of what you can be. Medic watched as the seer sat upright for the first time in days. His strength was frail, but his clarity undeniable. You imagine, Ilan said, machines that fly without fuel. You see cities among stars long before they are real. You speak of peace while harboring rage. You believe in justice while knowing it has never existed cleanly. And somehow, none of this fractures you. Alina stepped closer. Because we don't need the pieces to fit. We need the meaning they carry. Ilan closed his eyes. Meaning over structure. Belief over certainty. Creation beyond logic. He opened his eyes again. You live in impossibility. Jordan entered behind her, holding a small tablet. The anti-grav skateboard? I think I can actually build it now. Ilan chuckled, breath thin. Of course you can. You always could. The doors opened behind them. A junior Chilari ambassador stepped in. The council's decision is final, he announced. Alina stood taller. And you are accepted. Medic turned sharply. Because of, the ambassador corrected. Because of what happened to him. Because of what he saw. Because of what he became. Ilan bowed his head, not in exhaustion, but in reverence. The final decision arrived not in silence, but in reverent stillness. Earth was to be inducted into the Chilari Ascendancy's Great Council, not provisionally, not cautiously, fully, with one condition. All species capable of telepathy must now sign waivers before attempting to interface with human minds, a small clause, a protective measure. But behind it was a confession. We do not understand you, and we are not certain we ever will. In the days that followed, Ilan Varn entered a self-imposed retreat not out of shame, but necessity. He requested residence at a monastic sanctuary on the outer edges of the Keeler Nebula, where thought itself seemed to hum through the stardust. He spent hours staring at walls, breathing with rhythmic precision, whispering fragments of what he had witnessed. Their thoughts spiral, he would murmur. They dream of dreaming. They feel the weight of ideas that have never existed. And somehow, that burden gives them flight. Medic continued to represent him, now serving as liaison between Earth and the Ascendancy. He once asked the seer, during a quiet visit, what was it that truly changed you? Ilan smiled. A memory, he replied. From Deeren Holt, the maintenance worker? Ilan nodded. He remembered. The scent of warm cookies, his mother's kitchen, a moment so trivial, so deeply human. And in that memory, I saw a galaxy. Medic didn't speak. I saw a life that imagined safety. In taste, love, in warmth, and eternity, in the smallest gesture. No equation, no logic, just meaning, layered in fragments. And somehow, that meaning anchored him. The seer looked up at the empty sky above his sanctuary. You're kind. You build stars from crumbs. Meanwhile, on Earth, Alina read the Council's official declaration aloud to her colleagues. Peter Holt, once simply the man who fixed air systems, listened, quiet, thoughtful. When she finished, he scratched his chin and said, I finished that skateboard design. By the way, Alina arched a brow, planning to submit it to the Council's engineering board. Maybe, he said with a grin, if they're not too busy, recovering from my brain. In the heart of the galaxy, amid stars that pulsed with ancient wisdom, species gathered to discuss the meaning of humanity's inclusion. Most came to observe, some came to study, all came with caution. Ilan Varn's final report was shared, now considered a sacred document. It began simply, I have touched the minds of those who bend space. I have heard the thoughts of stars, but I had never touched infinity, until I touched a human. The report detailed what no Cholari had dared write before, that humans do not merely think, they echo, they reverberate. Within each human is a fractal of consciousness that bends time and contradiction. Not because it must, but because it can. They imagine futures while holding regrets. They feel nostalgia for things they never lived. They mourn possibilities, celebrate impossibilities, and carry belief like a blade, like a shield, like a song. Their danger, the report claimed, does not lie in their weapons or their reach. It lies in their minds' refusal to yield to the limits of what should be. They believe in things they know are false, Ilan wrote. They imagine what cannot be, and build it anyway. They hope without proof. They create without cause. And in doing so, they touch something even we cannot name. The council debated whether to treat Earth as an anomaly or a prophecy. Meanwhile, back on Luna Station, Peter walked the corridors with his new prototype in tow. The anti-grav board glided silently, perfectly stable. He passed Medic one afternoon, who watched him coast past with quiet wonder. You're flying, Medic said softly. Peter shrugged. I just built what I imagined. Medic's crest shimmered with the color of reluctant awe. You imagined, and then built. Isn't that how it always works? Peter asked. Medic did not answer. He simply watched, thinking not of blueprints or algorithms, but of mirrors reflecting mirrors, of thoughts within thoughts, and of a seer who once thought he understood the cosmos. Until he met a man who dreamed of cookies and gravity toys. The stars were unchanged. They still shimmered with ancient fire, still whispered across vacuum in the same silent poetry. But for the Chilari and for the greater ascendancy, nothing would ever feel quite the same, because something had entered their domain that did not follow the rules. It did not follow order, or hierarchy, or logic. It simply dreamed. And those dreams, wild and boundless, had already begun reshaping reality. Ilan Varn, once the most disciplined mind among telepaths, remained in quiet retreat. But his final words to the council continued to circulate among scholars, diplomats, and thinkers like sacred scripture. Do not fear their technology. Fear the way their minds allow contradiction without collapse. Fear their comfort with chaos. Fear their infinite depth. But above all, do not underestimate what they might think of next. Back on Luna, Alina stood beside Jordan and Peter as they reviewed the council's integration terms. A new era had begun, one not of domination, but of observation. They'll want to study us, Jordan said. Alina nodded. From a safe distance. Peter looked up from his schematics. They think we're unstable? No, Alina said softly, turning the screen toward them. They think we're infinite. A passage from Ilan's report had been inscribed into the council's records, a rarity among a culture that rarely poeticized thought. In every human I touched, I found an ocean, one that stretched further the deeper I went. There is no bottom, only reflection and reflection again, endlessly. You imagine, you create, you hold contradiction as if it were a friend. You build truth from myth and give shape to dreams, and you walk forward into futures. Your thoughts have not yet conceived with no fear that they might be impossible. Peter smiled. I guess that means we're officially weird enough to belong. Jordan laughed. We belong because we break the pattern. No, Alina said, looking back at the stars through the viewport. We belong because we are the pattern they never saw coming. Behind her, the console pulsed with one final message from Ilan Varn, recorded during his clearest hour. Accept them, study them, but never ever look away from them. For one day, their thoughts will give birth to stars we cannot yet imagine. And so began humanity's first step into the heart of the galactic community, not with force, not with conquest, but with the quiet trembling of species who had just realized they were not alone in consciousness vast enough to dream the universe anew.